Good morning. Welcome to the first meeting of the Montgomery County House Delegation for the 2026 legislative session. I am Chair Julie Polakovich-Carr, and I welcome everyone to our first meeting for the session on January 16th, 2026. So first, just a few logistics before we go to our special guests this morning. Because it has been a time of a lot of change in the House of Delegates and a lot of good changes for members of the Montgomery County delegation, I do just want to clarify for our listening public that the leadership positions within our House delegation have largely not changed. So I'm still chair. Our vice chair is still Delegate Emily Shetty. Our four local committee chairs remain unchanged. That's Delegate Linda Foley, Delegate Ryan Spiegel, Delegate Bernice Miracut North, and Delegate Natalie Ziegler. Our Montgomery County House Democratic Caucus continues to be co-chaired by Delegates Lorig Sharkoudian and Sarah Wallach. We do have one new leadership position within our delegation, a communications chair, and that is filled now by Delegate Teresa Warman, and we welcomed her on board a couple weeks ago in that position. Before we go further, I also just want to give a chance for our very hardworking analysts who support our delegation to get to introduce themselves. We'll go to Jen Young to make those introductions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate it. Good morning, everybody. Excuse me, I'm still getting over the flu or cold or whatever has been going around, so my voice is doing fun things. I am happy to be back as the counsel for the full delegation. I'm going to be continuing also in my role serving the Metro Washington Area Committee. I can, because it's Zoom, I can't see everybody, but Samantha Fairbanks is going to be continuing as counsel to the Land Use, Transportation, and Public Safety Committee. And Amanda Hunt will also be continuing in her role for Education, Elections, and Housing. But we have added Harry Hall. He's returned to DLS after taking a brief break at OPD. And he is going to be staffing the Economic Development Committee. So welcome for everybody, and we're looking forward to helping and answering any questions that need to be answered.
Thank you, and I will give our thanks here in advance. We know how much you all do in terms of helping support just our meetings week to week and drafting amendments. So thank you all for being here, and for those who are back, we look forward to working with you again. Let me next turn to our delegation administrator, who remains Ralph Costas. He's going to introduce our delegation's intern for this session.
Hi, everyone. Happy to be of service for yet another session. This year, we have an intern in the delegation. Her name is Nola Tischler. She is a sophomore over at University of Maryland, and I know she'll be happy to work with all of you. I've brought her around to most offices already, but if you haven't come by to say hello, please do.
All right. And with that, I think we are going to turn over to our two special guests for today. We have with us County Executive Mark Alrich and County Council President Natalie Fanny Gonzalez. And we thank you both for being here, and especially we wanted to have you for our first meeting of the session. I think it's really important to speak with our county partners early on. And Mr. County Executive, I'll turn to you first for your remarks.
Thank you very much, and I'm really happy to be here. And I just want to thank you for everything you all have done last year, despite all the difficulties. And the one thing that probably bothered us was the pension shift. There was a lot of really positive things that came out of the work you were able to do at the delegation level, and we do appreciate it. The county needs the support from the state, and the support we've gotten has been, I think, really important to us. I want to emphasize a few things today. First of all, I just want to say that you've got our list of priorities, and I don't want to go through the list of priorities. I think you've already got them, read them. If you have questions, I'm happy to take questions about those, but I want to just start with a broader overview of things. We have a number of strategic economic initiatives, and one is our BRT system, which we have to get off the ground. I mean, this thing has been on the books for over a decade. We've watched Virginia build major transportation projects that dwarf the cost of what we're trying to do. And our inability to move things continues to be a real impediment. In our capital budget, you will see some investment, but when we get to the operating budget, you're going to get our first effort to implement a special taxing district, which would focus on commercial property taxes along the routes, not a general tax on commercial property. And it's in line with what the strategy is in Northern Virginia. They pay for their transportation projects via these special taxing districts, and this would be our first effort to put one of these in place. The Institute for Health Computing has turned out to be the big deal we were hoping it was going to turn out to be. When this thing opened in this first year, they were sitting there with about 32 people. They're like 150 people now. And the most important thing that's happening is the partnerships that they're developing with other universities, also with companies in the life sciences space. And just to give you an idea of what makes IHC different than other research institutions, most of the time in the university, the researchers are working on their favorite projects. And you get into a department, you've got something you want to research, you research it. IHC is outward facing research. In other words, they're there for when a company comes, like AstraZeneca came to them, they're working on a breast cancer drug, and they said, we'd like to have you use your AI, work with us on your ability to use AI to help us with advancing this drug. So the research at the IHC is actually outwardly focused toward the companies of Montgomery County and beyond Montgomery County that want their assistance. So it's a significant thing because it's a reason for people to come here as opposed to just being another graduate school. So I just want you to understand the subtle difference, but it's actually a big difference in the kind of research they're doing over there. We continue concerned about the fallout from the state budget situation. I said in the beginning, the pension hit last year was fallout from last year's problems. We hope there's not fallout like that again. That was a rough equivalent of a penny on the tax rate. And if you don't raise that penny, then it's a penny of things that you're not doing elsewhere in the county. And it was hard dealing with that budget. I'm sure last year was hard, and I don't know whether you would say this is going to be harder, but it certainly seems like it's going to be difficult. So we're all holding on to see what happens, but I would be remiss if I didn't ask you to minimize the damage. And if things are going to happen, best that they get spread over many things in small amounts rather than large hits on critical programs. Unlike most other places in the state, HHS is a county operation, not a state operation in Montgomery County. And so that's a huge part of our budget that's in HHS that our residents depend on, and ever more given what's happening with the president. I'll give you an example. My worst nightmare, which is a small bad nightmare, is their effort to cut permanent supportive housing would have been a $7.5 million cut to the county government. That shuts down a program that houses 500 families, about 800 individuals. In a blink of an eye, those people would wind up on the street, and the county would be faced with, do we try to plug a $7.5 million hole, or do we put 500 families on the street? And what would the consequences be of that? Those are the kinds of things that we're looking at and have to think about that directly impact, and they have nothing to do with you in the sense, you all will never do this. This is all coming from the person who pretends to be president of the United States. And we will face more of these things. Threat to cut Head Start is the premier early childhood program in Montgomery County. The loss of Head Start, are we going to walk away from it and say, oh, well, or do we figure out how to plug it? So those are things we have to think about. Last year when I did the operating budget, we just did our capital budget yesterday, but we did our operating. We went into it and we did not make a lot of anticipated cuts. And that turned out to be the right decision because they did not do some of the worst things that they planned on doing. And we're going to, whatever is normal when we get to March, that's what our budget will be based on. We just have to all keep in mind, and I've said this, we know the president's not normal, so that if they start cutting things that have impacts, we're going to have to make cuts on the fly if there's no way to provide funding for things. But I guess I'd say we're as well prepared for a bad situation as you could possibly be. On the good side, we ended another year with a decent surplus. We've again, exceeded our reserves by a large margin. And so that gives us a little bit of cushion, but it doesn't give enough cushion to cover everything that could possibly happen. There are some other things that you want to talk a little bit about. One of the bills that concerns us is the firefighters' overtime bill. I know there's a lot of interest in that bill. The firefighter setup, the 48-hour but 42-hour pay is something that was long-standing and negotiated a long time ago. The hit on this bill, if we go to paying 6 hours overtime is more than 10 million a year. And so that would be another large addition to what we already have to deal with inside the budget. We would prefer to deal with this through negotiations rather than going to the state legislature for what they want. But whatever it is, just want you to be cognizant that that would be a pretty significant hit to the county. Like I said, we've sent you our priorities. One of the things that's important I want to emphasize is the 280CG, 287G immigration enforcement. We don't do it, but we know that's important state legislation. It would be good to have that support for that. There are issues around unemployment benefits that need to be raised. There are a lot of little things that are of importance to us. All those affect the residents of the county who have the least, and the less that the people who have the least have, the more that it winds up on the county government to have to try to fill those holes. I know you can be pressed. I don't know if you saw our press release on the capital budget yesterday, but I wanted to note a couple of things that are especially important. We raised the bonds to $340 million a year. The council had recommended 300. We had been at 280 for the last 4 or so years. We were at 300 in 2009, and we were as high as 340 when I was on the county council. $300 million, if we were to stick with $300 million, and we showed this to the council yesterday, we would not be able to do any project except the projects that are already in the CIP. No new projects, no 4th District Police Station, no, Natalie's smiling, and no anything else. I mean, the school's capital needs are real. And just to give you an idea how we got in this situation, the school board always tried to read the council's mind, which may not be a good thing to do, but they would look at the amount of money that was in the bond funding, and they would decide what they could ask for. And because the priority up until probably the last 2 or 3 years was capacity expansion in the system, we spent a ton of money on capacity expansion. That meant that they weren't putting money into repairs. And the school system, and this is on them, never came to the council and did what Dr. Taylor did the other day, which is basically say, we've got like $2.6 billion of repairs that we've neglected over the last 20 years. Oh, by the way, can you fix it? We were not able to fund his ask this year. I think he knew he was not going to be able to get it fully funded. But we're proposing to go up to 340 and then add 10 million a year for the next 5 years to try to give us a handle on some of these repairs. I mean, they're really critical infrastructure. We took out the admin building, which was a big $250 million chunk of what he asked for. We said we're not doing that. And we took out some other smaller projects, but it's something we need to deal with. And, our capital needs continue to be real. We're asking people to think about the formula based on per pupil spending. I'll say that, growing counties benefit from per pupil spending when population growth is going up, but it doesn't work very well in the reverse direction. And the short on that is that, for example, this school system's down 2,600 students this year. So it's about 10 or 12 students per classroom and per school. That's not enough to reduce the number of classrooms. You've got a bunch of grades, maybe it's 1 kid per classroom. It doesn't free up the ability to consolidate classes if you're going to maintain class size. And so effectively, I need the same number of teachers in the same number of classrooms, even as enrollment declines. And a better measure would be how many classrooms do you have to have at the targeted enrollment rather than how many pupils do we have? Because if we get a reduction based on pupil shrinkage, it will not mean that we've spent any less money on classrooms and providing services to those kids. The only thing I can think of that would be demonstrable would be we'd have fewer free lunches. But other than the fewer free lunches, the general costs for the operating the school system will not go down, and there's nothing the school system could do that would effectively make them go down. So we've been trying to explain to people how this formula will not work very well for us. And the other issue is around the ability to use money from the state budget capital for repairs. That's always been a difficult lift at a time when we're going to be asking for far less money for expansion. We're going to be asking mostly for repairs. it would be helpful if the state system acknowledged that the need in all these counties is now going to be maintenance and less so expansion. And I think only one school district or one county actually saw a population increase in the students. The rest of us are seeing declines. So you're going to see the needs of repair start to go front and center, probably for the other jurisdictions, from what I can tell. So just think about that stuff as you get into it. We are we continue to compete with Northern Virginia, and to some extent with the district, for company locations and job growth. Virginia has a higher vacancy rate than we do, which we take some comfort from, because we're not the only ones struggling with vacancies. Virginia's been hit pretty hard. They've been hit pretty hard with federal job losses, not as bad as us, but they're seeing shrinkage in their commercial space as well. But the biggest problem and the difference between Montgomery County and Virginia continues to be our inability to finance infrastructure. And the fact that you've had BRT in the book for a dozen years and you haven't been able to build a single inch of actual BRT is a problem. Like I said, we're going to try to address some of that by creating our own awkward special taxing district. It would be really helpful to get clean special taxing district legislation where you can say, we're taking a half mile on either side of a transit line, where no residential property, no existing residential property is part of the taxing district. Everything else is in the district, and then you don't need to do what we're going to do, which is draw a very squiggly map along the routes that we're putting forward, trying to draw out all the residential property that's in there. It's a lot cleaner to have the special taxing district, and frankly, it probably doesn't have any of the legal issues that can come from drawing squiggly lines. So that would give us the ability. We're not asking you to specify how we do it, but we're asking you to give us the authority to do it. And that would be important. And I understand the bill this year has a Senate cross file. So it's being introduced by a House member, and it already has a Senate cross file. And this was actually something that wasn't just a Montgomery County ask last year. A lot of even the Republican delegates, because we're all in the same boat, that, major transportation projects, we depend on the state. In Northern Virginia, major transportation projects, they do not depend on the state. They do the projects themselves with this funding mechanism. And so even the smaller counties in the state of Maryland can't do projects they want to do. And they're interested in the ability to do that. In a MACO meeting, they expressed, it's easier for us to explain to our residents why we're putting on tax on something in order to build something that we're all going to use than to explain to their residents we're sending money to Montgomery County. So we're not the only ones that are going to be asking for it, but I think it's important. We cannot continue to not deal with the infrastructure issues in the county and continue to look at Virginia in the headlights. And last thing I'll say on that is they just announced all the Northern Virginia jurisdictions are looking at a coordinated BRT program. They already have BRT in Virginia. Now they're looking at putting their BRT program on steroids. If we continue to look at what they do, we should all stop talking about why they're eating a lunch in terms of economic development. They're very, very aggressive. Speaking of economic development, we're doing our first TIF in Montgomery County. We have 2 other people who've approached us for a TIF. I'm excited about doing a TIF. It's the only way we could build infrastructure at this scale and make this work for a developer. But we're going to ask to make a little wrinkle in the TIF that would make it not only better for the East County project, but for all the projects. The District of Columbia allows TIF that includes state sales tax. And what happened in DC is they did this major project where 50 comes into DC by South Dakota Avenue. I think it's a Costco and a Home Depot and a bunch of other retail in the typical shopping center. And the TIF, because it included sales tax, paid off the bonds in a matter of a few years. It cut the time it took to pay off the bonds dramatically. And if we had that capacity to throw the sales tax in, say, from White Oak, those bonds would get paid off a lot faster. You're not losing sales tax that because you don't have it right now, just like we're not losing property tax that we don't have right now. But the sooner the bonds are paid back, the sooner all the taxes from that property start flowing into the county coffers and become a positive. So using the sales tax would accelerate it. DC's already shown what the effect can be. We think it's worth looking at. So please, I know that somebody's told me there's a bill coming forward on that. So when it comes forward, give it consideration. I think you'll find that it'll help us accelerate our economic development efforts. We are also making an effort, serious effort, to diversify ourselves, not just with life sciences, but looking at other manufacturing. So we've been showing the county to manufacturers who are interested in setting up shop here. We've actually benefited from our trips to Asia because of the tariffs. Companies recognize they have to actually build things in America. And so we've been approached by a number of companies about possibly being a location for building. We're going to have to do some rezoning to create more industrial land, but I think we can do that. If you look at a map of Montgomery County, even with the ag reserve, there's a lot of county property that is really not anything being built on. And so we may take another look at where there are locations we could possibly add land to the mix that we could actually put in an industrial park. Montgomery County has no industrial park. I'd like to find 100 acres for at least one industrial park. So we're, starting to work on what we can do to diversify, which I think in the long run is where we need to be going. And we've had conversations with the state because as we've had some bites that didn't actually come to fruition, where we weren't able to compete with other states' incentives, we've been able to talk to the state about, where we lie in incentives. And in life sciences, for example, Massachusetts has a 10-year, $1 billion incentive program. Nothing like that in Montgomery County. So when companies want to think about where they're going to go, we're not able to put up the kind of incentives that other jurisdictions, and the county can't compete with the state of Massachusetts or with the state of Texas. We lost somebody who wanted to do solar panels to another state. So we've asked the state to think about policy that would increase the ability to give incentives to major projects that have, I think, is long-term payoff in jobs and in tax revenue. So that's important to us. There are a couple other pressures on the county. We have our ballot system, and the number of signatures needed for the ballot to get something on the ballot is ridiculously low. And it's time to change that. So we'll be asking to increase the number of signatures that are required. There's a ballot initiative this year, if it makes it to the ballot, that would crush the county. We're hoping it's unconstitutional, but it would limit how much money we could raise based on last year's budget. So just think about this in the context of last year. We have a normal budget going along. Then we have to absorb the whatever inflation there is, plus the pension shift. We would not be able to fund the budget that paid for everything plus the pension shift if it exceeded the inflation adjustment. We would be in deep trouble. And so we need to not let crazy things get on the ballot so easily. So we could use some help on that. And again, I just think that I'm very happy with, what you all have been able to do. I understand what you're going to have to deal with this year. I don't take this lightly. And I look forward to working with you. I think from my local perspective, we have a good relationship with Jocelyn Pena-Melnick. I've had a good relationship with her for years, and which is good. And I have a good relationship with Aisha. And so we're talking and actually beginning to talk about economic development and things we can do together, which is something that had not happened before. So I'm excited about that because the more we cooperate, I think the more opportunities are going to open up. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Mr. County Executive. And colleagues, I appreciate that we're starting to get a question queue with raised hands. We're going to go next to Council President Fanny Gonzalez next for her remarks, and then we'll take questions. Council President, congratulations on your election last month. We're glad to have you here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I am so proud of each one of you and the Montgomery County delegation. And I was very excited to see the new positions that Madam Speaker Jocelyn Pena-Melnick gave to many of you, and that just speaks highly of Montgomery County. So thank you for that. I'm at Brookside Gardens because I'm about to join an event, but I'm gonna go very quickly. I'm not gonna repeat what County Executive Mark Elrich said. I'm gonna say a couple of things that he didn't say, but I know that we're in support. One of them is he mentioned briefly, the police station for District 4, that's the Glenmont only area of the county. That's the oldest police station in the county. We are planning a co-location with the Maryland National Capital Parking Planning Commission. So Park Police will be there too. The cost is $116 million, but we were able to drop that cost to $100 million. That means that we need your help. The request that you can see on the priority letters is to see if the delegation can help us with $5 million. So that's the request that we have, and I wanted to highlight it here. When we say that we want to recruit more police officers, that also means to ensure that we have places that are safe and healthy for police officers to be. And that current police station is an embarrassment for the county. So please keep that in mind. The county executive went over the need of having a strong budget coming from you guys regarding MCPS. Yes, we have less students, but that doesn't mean that our needs have decreased. Actually, I will say the opposite. My own kids go to a community school, they're in middle school, and I'm telling you, we need help. And I hope that you can please keep that in mind. And then very quickly, please continue giving us our own autonomy when it comes to local autonomy for Montgomery County and efforts to ensure that we have opportunities to increase or generate more revenue for the county. So those are issues that we truly care about. We're gonna have, as a council, or public hearings regarding the CIP that the county executive released yesterday. They're gonna happen on February 9th and 10th. And we look forward to working on the operating budget as soon as we get it from the county executive in mid-March. We are gonna have meetings with the county council is going to have meeting about our legislative positions in Annapolis in a week from now. So you're going to be getting our positions on those bills that are coming from your end soon, as we have done in the past. And with that, I'm going to drop it here. I'm going to stay for a few minutes to answer any questions. And then I do need to leave by 10:05 at the latest. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you for being here. And to my members, the council president, we did know that she has a hard stop this morning. So let me just check. We have 3 people in the question queue. Do any of you have a question that's specific to our council president? No. Okay, well then I'll just take you in order, and to the extent it's appropriate for her to answer, and we understand, Natalie, when you need to drop off. Recognizing Delegate Chi first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning. I appreciate both the new council president and our county executive for taking the time to share their priorities. I understand, and I'm very pleased to hear from the county executive, not only the strong focus on growing our economy, but I have been aware that Montgomery County is now going to adopt its first tax increment financing project. I have always believed and argued that this is a missed opportunity for Montgomery County, especially for a community like East County that has been neglected for way too long. So I have been working with Tom Lewis, who is now part of the speaker's staff,
Yep.
Creating this, using TIF to give county special taxing districts half of the sales tax to pay off the debt that, as you were referencing to. The caveat, the challenge is he's now part of the speaker's staff, so I don't know who the point of contact is. I'm about to drop the bill, not file the bill, but to take it off of my list if there's no one to collaborate with. I need someone at the senior staff level to work with me on this. So can you tell me who is in charge right now?
Well, we are going to replace Tom. So I'd say the person to work with is Rich. Rich knows this stuff really well. He's been deeply immersed in it. And we'll try to find out who's filing. There's somebody else filing in another county. I'll see if I can find out who that is.
Okay, because Tom has asked me to do that, and I've been working with Tom and Melanie
Right.
for months on this, because I worked on this issue for 2 years. I'm happy to continue if there's a point of contact in the county. And of course, the bill would not just benefit Montgomery County,
Right.
but I just want to know, the status of that. Yeah.
I will
I
do.
know Rich, I'll reach out to him. Yeah.
And I also want to say I appreciate the fact you recognize the importance of the TIF. When I got in there, that TIF was a forbidden thing in Montgomery County, and I said,
I
you can't
know.
do that. So we're free.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Delegate Chi. Next, we'll go to Delegate Foley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. County Executive, for being here. And thank you, if she's still on, to our new council president. And let me say, if she's still on, that she's in my thoughts, her family in Venezuela. I hope everybody's safe. Mr. County Executive, my question is, I heard you talk about the need for BRT, and I totally support BRT. I think that's a integral part of the solution to transportation issues in Montgomery County. But I recall that a few years ago, we got the state to allocate a big chunk of money because there was some stadium changes in Prince George's County,
Right.
and we got some. And so my question is a two-part question, and one related to that, like what happened to that money? Why are we unable to start BRT? Shouldn't we spend that money first? Maybe we already have. I just want to know what the status is, number one. Number two, on the special taxing district for BRT,
Yeah.
don't we already have a special tax district at White Flint? And can you explain why the law that allowed us to create the special taxing district in White Flint isn't sufficient to be able to address this problem?
Because the taxing district in White Flint, and I was a council member when it was created via the squiggly line approach. Basically, they took a map and they drew out all of the existing residential property. You can do it, but it comes with some legal peril that does not exist if you have a clean special taxing district. In other words, we're drawing things out, and we could be perceived as creating a differential tax for people based on how we draw them out, as opposed to doing it by legislative authority. So that's why we've pushed for the district. It's simpler. I mean, it will cost us a little bit more money to do this in terms of mapping and all the other stuff, but we just don't want to do something that has legal challenge attached to it, and then we've got to come back and deal with it. So while we did it once, the general consensus is this is not the optimal way to do it. But we reached the point this year that lacking the optimal way to do it, we're going to put its first districts in that way. But hopefully legislation can be passed that would simplify it.
Okay.
It's really a matter of simplifying and preventing legal vulnerabilities. As far as the funds for BRT, this is expensive. And, the system we proposed is a very large system. And the amount of money from the state is not sufficient in and of itself to fund the building of the system more rapidly than it's being built right now. Our projects are taking years many years rather than a couple of years to build, because we don't have the capital, and at the speed the capital comes in at, we're just paralyzed to spending it based on how the receipts come in. So your money's being used. I'm sure this has already been part of what we used on Veers Mill Road. Veers Mill Road is probably one of the first ones that's going to be ready to go. The next one we're working on is Central BRT on 355 from Rockville, I think, up to Germantown. And for actually completing or turning New Hampshire Avenue, not Colesville Road, sorry, into an actual BRT instead of calling it BRT. We're putting those improvements in there in the budget. But I can tell you from my experience, we have had money for design that we had to spread over 3 years sometimes, not because it would take 3 years to do the design, but because we couldn't afford to spend more than, say, 6 or 7 million a year, and we had to stretch it out. We need a larger source of money that'll actually let us do things. And the thing about a taxing district, I think we are actually going to use the state's ongoing fund to support payments on a bond. But the thing about a taxing district is once it's in place, we can float bonds, 30-year bonds, against the long-term revenue that would be generated by a taxing district. That's a big deal, because then I don't need to raise the revenue all at once. We can make plans, we can fund the construction and the design, and we're not waiting for each year to see how much money comes into our coffers to let us move something forward. So it makes a big difference which way we do this. Your funds, I can tell you, are definitely being spent, and I'll get our folks to send you a note about what we've done with it, so you know they can give you an answer from my transportation people.
Okay, great. That would be helpful going forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Delegate Spiegel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, Mr. Executive. Good to see you
Good
as
morning.
always. First, let me just say that I appreciate your comments on how difficult it is to compete with Northern Virginia on transportation infrastructure. And you and I have had a number of conversations about that, and gives me a quick opportunity to plug my bill on creating regional transportation authorities, which would be one way to address that challenge. But I wanted to ask you about something else this morning, if I might. The recommended capital budget that came out yesterday indicated a pretty significant, or very significant drop off in impact tax revenue.
Yep.
And my understanding is that at least a significant portion of the reason for that is the drop off in housing construction activity in the county, in a time when obviously we're desperate for more housing supply. So I was just wondering if you could address that.
Well, I'll give you a complicated view. First of all, that drop off in housing construction is happening everywhere around us. There are very few jurisdictions that are seeing increases. There's a story in one of today's papers about this continuing lag in housing construction that is facing everybody. Montgomery County had a couple of particular problems. There were some projects that were approved as high-rise developments. There is no market for high-rise. There's very, very little market for high-rise. We have overzoned much of the county for high-rise. And so the developers went to Park and Planning and had to ask them to redo their approvals so they could build projects, townhouses and smaller apartment buildings for which there's actually a market. And that took a couple of projects that were, planning to go forward to come out of the queue and to have to, reposition their projects and go back and get new approvals. One of them has gotten their new approval, but then it takes time to go from that to then investing in the design and bringing the project forward. Park and Planning has approved a large number of projects in the last year and a half that are primarily rental property. And those projects, the investors, the developers have taken it through Park and Planning, and we expect to see them start coming in for approvals pretty soon. So I look at this as a momentary blip in the machine, largely caused by a combination of market factors and people deciding they need to adjust their properties to the economic realities that their tall buildings aren't going to be built. The developer in Pike and Rose who did this had approval for 3 towers. And he said there's no market for 3 towers. And I can either sit here and not do anything. And when he first went to Park and Planning didn't want to approve his revised project. It took a little nudge to get them to approve his revised project. Then he was followed by a second developer who did the same thing. So we're watching people kind of recast what they think they're going to build based on what the market is. If you wonder why there's no market for high-rise, it's just the cost to build a high-rise is north of $600 a square foot. And so you try to translate that into any kind of apartment, and it limits who the market's going to be for that apartment in a way that when you do mid-rise or you do projects that are not in concrete and steel, and your costs come down to about half the price of a high-rise, those projects are more likely to go forward. And we've had a few developers, Folger Pratt is one of them, who did not take advantage of the full density and built something at a lower height that they were able to get on the market and build. So I think you're going to see more of those adjustments. But we're monitoring it. And I can tell you that our queue for the projects we're funding for the next 2 years is completely full. And that's more than $100 million that's out that we're putting into projects. And we have developers for it. They're waiting to get their approvals, or they're waiting for the last tranche of money from the state to get approved, and they're going to go forward. So I think we're going to be seeing a lot more action.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Next is Delegate Miracle North.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. County Executive, for joining us today and your further remarks. One of the remarks that really got my attention was your concern about the permanent supportive housing potentially being done away with, and the 500 families talking about being on the streets. I possibly. I wanted to get a little more detail as to what conversations have been had about the potential consequences of this concern, what's been discussed, and how do you think the state can help, besides, pushing us for more housing and more funding?
I mean, so we have a very active housing HHS department, and Christine Hong is head of the division dealing with homelessness. We've had conversations about it. Be honest with you, if there are not 500 places to put people, unless we're actually willing to pay what the federal government was paying and plug that hole. It's pretty simple. If the money goes away, there's no money to pay the rents, those people wind up homeless. If we pay the rents, that's say $7.5 million that we weren't anticipating paying in any budget, which means something else in the budget dies. Or, you raise taxes. You all know, like, I'm not allergic to raising taxes, and since you opened the door, I was going to say Montgomery County continues to be the lowest tax county in the entire region, except for the District of Columbia on residential property taxes. Montgomery County is at $2.5, Frederick's at $1.11, Howard County is at $1.33 or 34. Prince George's County is at $1.34.7. Fairfax County is at $1.15 for residential and $1.28 for commercial. Reston is at $22 for residential and $1.49 for commercial. That's what's around us. So raising taxes a penny or two here in Montgomery County to fill some of these holes would still leave us cheapest jurisdiction in the region. And the only jurisdiction that's lower than us is the District of Columbia, which is lower than us. They're at 85 cents for residential property, but listen to their commercial property rate. So if a property is worth $10 million, the tax rate's $1.89. That would be 87 cents higher than us. If your property is worth $5 million to $10 million, the district is $1.77. And if your property is worth $2 million to $5 million, the tax rate is $1.66. So if we need to do things, we've got space to do it without changing our status as the second lowest residentially taxed area in the region. And I'm not looking forward to doing that. And I do believe that Virginia is right in having higher taxes on commercial property because it lets them build infrastructure and it takes some of the load off the general tax base. That's my broad overview of this. But the numbers I give you, I can send you the charts. We got them, this is done by the District of Columbia. We had Jones Lang LaSalle did an analysis of what it costs to build in Montgomery County versus Fairfax County, and concluded that for both small projects and large projects, Montgomery County was less expensive, even factoring in the difference in corporate income tax. Virginia is obviously about a 2.5 cent lower corporate income tax than Maryland, but Northern Virginia counties carry a lot of the burden that would normally be carried by the state. So the counties have taxing authority that doesn't exist in Maryland. In Fairfax County, they have a business licensing tax. Fairfax County gets $200 million a year from a licensing tax on businesses. There is no such thing as a licensing tax in Montgomery County. So when you're comparing things, there's a lot out there.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Delegate Wilkins.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Mr. County Executive. I just wanted to really thank you for your support and being a champion for the Viva White Oak project. And I just wanted to make sure that I emphasize when we're talking about the TIF, that we're talking about a really large scale development project.
Oh, yeah.
Everyone's probably somewhat familiar with, but it's really going to transform the East County region. It's going to be commercial, retail. We talked about housing needs, various types of housing as a part of that, and just a really major project. And so I'm very supportive and appreciate your work on the TIF and also the developer that has been committed to redeveloping that area. My question is the legislation that you mentioned, is that legislation regarding the TIF, is that something that's specific to that project, or is it something
No,
that is going to be broader? I just want to
no,
understand what
I
that
would use, yeah, I would use it everywhere. I mean, in White Flint, the learners have approached us about redeveloping their mall area. And they're going to have a large component of it that'll be paying, I think, both sales and entertainment tax, along with the regular taxes, commercial for the rest for the commercial properties that are retail, and then the office properties, and then the residential. So I anticipate that if learners build what they've talked to us about building, there should be a substantial amount of sales tax coming off of that. So that would be another place where they would benefit from paying this off quicker and getting the money back and all the money back into the county. We haven't reached an agreement yet. I think people are still trying to flesh out what they want. But having opened the door once, we've had at least 2 other people approach us about using it. We're analyzing each project to see whether it makes sense to do it. Something they don't always make sense. I wouldn't do it for a tiny little project, but for projects that have significant capital costs for the developer that they would be challenged to undertake, then we're open to it. And White Flint's kind of like White Oak in the sense that, White Oak was just a bunch of sand and gravel pits with no infrastructure. But White Flint was a giant parking lot with one mall. All the water and sewer and electricity went to one place. There was no network or road or sewers underneath any of that you can build off of. So all that has to be added de novo.
Thank you. And it looks like our last question in the queue is Delegate Wu.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair. Thank you, County Executive. I really appreciate your commitment to grow the economy and make the housing more affordable. I think one question about related, probably somebody kind of covered, like rental control, right? So we heard about this rental control may have some negative impact in terms of housing affordability. Is there any taste on the county level, say you may revisit the rental control policy or twist it around?
Our rent control policy is pretty tame, and I just want to point out a couple of things to people. The rent control limit is inflation plus 3%, which would put us close to 5.5 or 6%. It's a limit, but it's not a hard limit. But I want to go back to historically. Rents in Montgomery County for the previous 20 years have gone up on an average of under 3%, closer to 2%. So the cap here is well above the historical average. But the issue gets raised, well, what if something happens and my expenses exceed inflation, and then I'm only going to get an inflation adjustment? The bill was written to make it similar to the Tacoma Parks law, which we changed as a result of a court case, where landlords can get rent increases to cover their expenses and essentially their rate of return. So if somebody comes in and says my expenses went up 8% last year, not 6%, because I had to put on a new roof and we had major plumbing issues we had to deal with, they would go in and they could get a higher rent increase. And it is depoliticized. It does not go to a rent committee or the landlord tenant affairs office. It's simply a calculation. You have a financial analyst, they come in, they demonstrate that their costs exceed their rents, they get an approval for a higher rent. Landlords don't tell you that part of it, but that's the way it works. It's a by right adjustment, so somebody can't say, no, you can't have it. So if they have a problem, we can fix the problem. And I can tell you, this is when I was on the council in Tacoma Park, it was painful, but there were times when they approved 17% increases in rent, and I had to say, okay. because it's no longer a political decision. It's just an economic analysis decision.
Thank you.
They just don't like it.
Great. Thank you. I think that is all of the questions from members of the delegation. Thank you, Mr. County Executive, for being here today and for being generous with your time and answering a lot of questions. Clearly, there was a lot of good discussion, and that is much appreciated all around. So again, thank you.
I look forward to working with all of you. We've got to make this a great session. It's got potential. There are a lot of great things we can do. So thank you.
Sure. Thank you. Okay, colleagues, we're getting towards the end of the meeting. That was the end of our formal program. Let me turn to our committee chairs if there are announcements about local committee meetings for next week. Chair Foley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, and don't beat me up, committee. But we are going to have another early morning meeting at 8:30 a.m. on Thursday next week, Economic Development Committee. Please plan on being there. I anticipate we might have a vote on another bill. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Moving to Chair Spiegel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Land Use, Transportation, and Public Safety Committee will be meeting virtually at noon on Monday. I realize that it is a holiday, it's Martin Luther King Day, but it's a working day for the General Assembly, and it seems that all the members of the committee are available. So we'll be meeting noon on Monday.
Thank you. Chair Ziegler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Education, Elections, and Housing Subcommittee will be meeting at noon on Wednesday. That meeting time is the best we could come up with at the moment, but I am open to further discussion. Thanks so much.
Thank you. And Chair Mercure North.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Metro Washington Committee will not be meeting on Monday, but we will be meeting the following Monday on Mondays at 1:30.
Thank you very much. Ralph, do you have any announcements either for members of the delegation or for our staff?
I do not. All good here.
Very good. And then just as a reminder, our delegation members know this, but for the listening public, all of our meetings, our Friday meetings, as well as all of our committee meetings are going to continue to be on Zoom this session. Announcements about future meeting dates, again, for any of the 4 local committees or for full delegation are listed on our delegation website, montgomerycountydelegation.com. But if you are not yet on our email distribution list, please reach out to Ralph. His email address is on our delegation website. He sends out a few notifications throughout the week so that folks who are interested in tracking particular bills or just interested in the briefings that our delegation do can be notified about those upcoming meetings and what is on the agenda for those. With that, is there any other business from any other members of the delegation? Okay.